Ambassador Kim Tae-ho walked through the massive halls of the Galactic Senate building on Nexus Prime. His black diplomatic uniform was perfectly clean, and his shoes made soft, clicking sounds on the crystal floor. The building was so huge that it took him 20 minutes to walk from his office to the main Senate chamber. Giant windows showed the view of 3 different moons hanging in the purple sky. Tae-ho had been Earth's main ambassador to the galaxy for 5 long years. When he first arrived, the alien species had looked at him like he was some kind of primitive creature from a backward planet. Earth was still new to the galactic community, and most aliens thought humans were not very smart or advanced. But Tae-ho never got angry or upset. He smiled at everyone and worked hard to prove that humans deserved respect. His assistant Park Min-seo came running up to him with a data pad in her hands. She was young and eager and had been helping him for 2 years. Her job was to keep track of all the different alien governments and their complicated politics. There were over 300 different species in the Galactic Empire, and each one had their own customs and ways of thinking. "Good news, sir," she said with a big smile on her face. "The Vrexian Trade Minister just approved our fusion reactor designs. He said human engineering is surprisingly good for such a young species. That means we can start selling our reactors to 12 different star systems." Tae-ho felt proud when he heard this news. Human fusion reactors were clean and efficient, and many alien species wanted to buy them. This would bring a lot of money to Earth and help human colonies grow stronger. It was exactly the kind of peaceful progress he had been working toward. The human colonies were doing very well. On New Sol Colony, about 50,000 humans had built a beautiful city with parks and schools. The colonists grew food and mined valuable metals that they traded with alien merchants. On Harmony Station, humans worked together with 3 different alien species to build the biggest spaceport in that region of the galaxy. The 3rd colony was smaller, but it had the best medical facilities, and many aliens came there when they were sick or injured. Tae-ho thought about his family as he walked. His wife Lee So-young ran the Human Cultural Exchange program right here on Nexus Prime. She organized festivals and art shows where humans and aliens could learn about each other. Their twin children, Hai-jin and Hai-rin, were 8 years old and went to the Integrated Galactic Academy. They played with alien children every day and spoke 4 different languages fluently. When Tae-ho got home that evening, So-young was helping the twins with their homework. Hai-jin was writing a report about Altarian music, while Hai-rin was learning to solve math problems the way the crystalline species did it. The apartment was full of drawings and art projects that showed humans and aliens working together. "How was your day at the Senate?" she asked him while she made dinner. The food smelled wonderful and included spices from 3 different worlds. "Very good." He told her about the fusion reactor deal and several other small victories he had achieved. A new trade agreement with the mining guild would let human companies dig for rare metals on 6 uninhabited planets. The Cultural Committee had approved funding for a new human art museum. 3 more alien species had agreed to let human students attend their universities. But Tae-ho did not know about the secret meetings that were happening in other parts of the city. General Vex Korvac of the militant Corvani Empire was talking to leaders from 12 other xenophobic species. They met in hidden rooms with no recording devices and spoke in whispers about the human problem. The Corvani were one of the oldest and most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds and believed that only the strongest species deserved to survive. General Korvac was a tall reptilian creature with sharp teeth and cold yellow eyes. He had been watching humanity grow stronger for 5 years, and he did not like what he saw. "Humans are advancing too quickly," he told the other alien leaders. 5 years ago, they barely had spaceflight. Now they have fusion reactors that are better than ours. Their colonies are growing and their population is increasing. If we wait much longer, they will become too powerful to stop. The other aliens nodded in agreement. They had all heard stories about human history and how humans fought terrible wars against each other for thousands of years. Some aliens worried that humans would bring their violent ways to the galaxy. Others were simply jealous that such a young species was becoming successful so quickly. Dr. Yoon Jae-sung was working in his laboratory on Earth during these secret meetings. He was one of humanity's best scientists, and he had just made an incredible breakthrough. His new faster-than-light communication system could send messages across the entire galaxy in just a few seconds. This would make trade and diplomacy much easier for everyone. But when news of this invention reached the Corvani, they saw it as proof that humans were dangerous. General Korvac told his supporters that humans were secretly developing weapons of mass destruction. He had no evidence for this claim, but fear and prejudice made the other aliens believe him. Back on Nexus Prime, Tejo continued his daily work of building friendships and trust between humans and aliens. He attended boring committee meetings and gave speeches about cooperation and peace. He negotiated trade deals and cultural exchanges. He helped solve small disputes between human colonists and their alien neighbors. The Galactic Senate had democratic principles that were supposed to protect all member species from unfair treatment. Tejo truly believed that patience and hard work would eventually earn humanity a respected place in the galactic community. He thought that showing kindness and following the rules would keep his people safe. His children were learning and growing in the integrated school system. They had alien friends and teachers who cared about them. So Young's cultural programs were bringing different species together through art and music and food. The human colonies were prosperous and peaceful. Everything seemed perfect. But in the dark meeting rooms, the Corvani were making their final plans. They called it a preventive strike that would eliminate the human threat before it could grow any stronger. They chose their targets carefully, focusing on places where they could cause the maximum amount of fear and suffering. None of them cared that their targets would be innocent children who had never hurt anyone. The attack happened during the Festival of Unity, which was the most important celebration in the galactic calendar. Every species sent representatives to promote peace and friendship between different worlds. The festival lasted for 7 days and included parades and concerts and speeches about working together for a better future. Tejo was sitting in the Senate chambers listening to a speech about interspecies cooperation when the first emergency alerts started coming in. The warning signals were loud and urgent and made everyone in the room look around with confusion and worry. Park Min-seo ran into the chamber with her datapad in her hands, and her face was completely white with shock. "Sir," she whispered in a shaky voice, "there are reports coming in from the colonies. Something terrible has happened at New Sol Colony." Tejo felt his stomach drop as he looked at the datapad. The first report seemed impossible to believe. Corvani battlecruisers had appeared in orbit around New Sol Colony without any warning. Instead of targeting military installations or government buildings, they had focused their weapons on schools and residential areas where families lived. The colony's emergency broadcast was still coming through, and Tejo could hear screaming and explosions in the background. The colony administrator was crying as he spoke into the communication device. The Corvani ships had used plasma bombs against the elementary school during morning classes. 300 human children between the ages of 5 and 12 had been killed instantly. More reports started flooding in from Harmony Station. Park Min-seo's hands were shaking as she read the incoming messages out loud to the stunned Senate chamber. The Corvani forces had landed ground troops who went directly to the human kindergarten during their morning assembly time. They had used banned plasma weapons that burned everything they touched. 250 children had been murdered while they were singing songs and learning their lessons. The teachers who tried to protect them were killed too. The Corvani soldiers had set fire to the playground equipment and destroyed all the toys and books. Parents were running through the burning streets searching for their babies, but there was nothing left to find. The alien senator sat in complete silence as holographic images of the destruction filled the chamber. The pictures showed burned schools with melted playground equipment and small bodies scattered across what used to be happy places where children played and learned. Teddy bears and toy spaceships lay in the rubble next to lunchboxes that would never be opened again. Then the worst news came from the third colony. Tejo's brother Kim Tae-min had been visiting there with his wife and 3 young children. They had gone to celebrate little Mi Young's 6th birthday at the Human Community Center, where all the families gathered for special occasions. The Corvani had gotten intelligence about the birthday party, and they had timed their attack perfectly. 47 children between the ages of 4 and 10 had been at the community center when the plasma bombs hit. None of them survived. The building had been completely destroyed, and the families inside had no chance to escape. Tejo stared at the images of his brother's family among the victims. 6-year-old Mi-young, who had always hugged his legs when he visited the colony. 9-year-old Dong-min, who wanted to be a starship pilot. 4-year-old Su-bin, who was afraid of the dark but brave enough to pet alien animals at the zoo. General, Korvac stood up in front of the Senate, and his yellow eyes showed no emotion at all as he looked at the horrific pictures. His voice was calm and cold as he explained why the Corvani had murdered innocent children. These attacks were necessary to prevent humanity from developing planet-killing weapons, he announced to the shocked assembly. Our intelligence reports indicated that human colonies were being used as secret military research facilities. We acted to protect the galaxy from a species that has a history of violence and warfare. But Tejo knew this was a lie. He had access to all human research projects, and he knew that Earth had no weapons of mass destruction. The fusion reactors and communication systems were civilian technology that could help everyone in the galaxy. The Corvani had not attacked military targets because there were no military targets to attack. This was not a preventive strike or a military operation. This was calculated genocide designed to terrorize humanity into leaving the galaxy. The Corvani had deliberately chosen to murder children because they knew it would cause the maximum amount of pain and fear. They wanted to send a clear message that humans were not welcome among the stars. The Vrexian chancellor stood up and suggested that the Senate should impose economic sanctions on the Corvani Empire. The Altarian representatives proposed forming a committee to investigate the attacks. The crystalline ambassador recommended a formal censure that would be added to the official records. All of these responses were meaningless political theater, while human children lay dead on 3 different worlds. The alien governments were afraid of Corvani military power, and they were willing to sacrifice human lives to avoid a real confrontation. They offered empty words of sympathy, but no real action or justice. Tejo felt something break inside his chest as he realized the truth about the galaxy he had served so faithfully. These aliens did not respect peace or diplomacy, or the democratic principles they claimed to follow. They only understood strength and fear and violence. His 5 years of patient work had been built on a foundation of lies. He thought about his own children, Hai-jin and Hai-rin, who were probably at school right now playing with their alien friends. He thought about So-young organizing cultural events to bring different species together. He thought about all the human families on the colonies who had trusted the Galactic Senate to protect them. The Senate continued their debate about sanctions and committees while the images of dead children filled the chamber. Some senators argued about jurisdiction and proper procedures. Others worried about the economic impact of opposing the Corvani. A few alien species even suggested that humanity might have provoked the attacks somehow. Nobody talked about justice for the murdered children. Nobody demanded that the killers be brought to trial. Nobody seemed to care that an entire generation of human families had been destroyed for no reason except hatred and fear. That night, Tejo went home to find So-young crying over the news feeds from the colonies. The Integrated Academy had sent the human children home early because they were too upset to continue with their lessons. Many of them had lost cousins or friends in the attacks. The alien children did not know how to comfort their human classmates. Hai-jin asked his father why the bad aliens had hurt the children on the colonies. Hai-rin wanted to know if they were safe on Nexus Prime. Tejo held his twins close and promised them that nothing would ever happen to them, but inside his heart he knew the promises were not enough anymore. The galaxy had shown humanity what it really thought of them and their children. 3 days after the massacre, the Galactic Senate held an emergency session to discuss their response to the attacks. Tejo sat in his usual seat and watched as alien politicians gave speeches about the tragic loss of life and the need for measured responses. The Vrexian chancellor proposed economic sanctions that would reduce trade with the Corvani Empire by 15% over the next 2 years. The Altarian prime minister suggested forming a special committee to investigate whether the attacks violated interstellar law. This committee would take 6 months to gather evidence and another 6 months to write a report. Then the full Senate would debate the report for several more months before deciding on any action. Meanwhile, the crystalline ambassador recommended sending a formal diplomatic protest to the Corvani government. This protest would be filed in the official records and would express the Senate's strong disappointment with the attacks. The document would be very stern and would use harsh language like deeply concerning and highly inappropriate. Taeho listened to these pathetic responses and felt rage building in his chest. Economic sanctions that would barely affect the Corvani economy. Investigations that would take years to complete. Diplomatic protests that meant absolutely nothing. These aliens were offering empty gestures while human children remained dead and unavenged. The debate continued for hours with various senators explaining why immediate action was impossible. Some worried about the legal precedent of military intervention. Others feared that opposing the Corvani would destabilize the entire region. A few even suggested that humanity should accept some responsibility for provoking the attacks. When the session ended, the Senate had voted to impose minor trade restrictions and form an investigative committee. There would be no military response, no demand for the arrest of the killers, no real justice for the murdered children. The galaxy's most powerful governments had decided that human lives simply did not matter enough to risk a confrontation. That evening, Taeho returned to his quarters and found So Young helping their children with homework again. But the atmosphere was completely different now. Haejin was having nightmares about monsters attacking his school. Haerin was afraid to play with her alien classmates because she wondered if they secretly hated humans too. So Young's cultural exchange programs had been canceled because many alien parents did not want their children associating with humans anymore. Some species worried that humans might be violent and dangerous like the Corvani had claimed. Others simply did not want to get involved in what they saw as a political dispute. After the children went to bed, Taeho made a secure communication link to Earth. The signal took several minutes to connect, because it had to travel through multiple relay stations to avoid being intercepted. When the connection finally stabilized, General Han Dongwoo appeared on the screen. Dongwoo had been Taeho's roommate at the military academy 20 years ago, before Taeho chose the diplomatic path. He was now Earth's highest-ranking military officer and the man responsible for defending the homeworld. His face was grim and angry as he looked at his old friend. "The Senate will not act," Taeho said quietly. "They are too afraid of Corvani military power. They will sacrifice human lives to maintain their comfortable peace. Our children mean nothing to them." Dongwoo nodded grimly. "We have been preparing for this possibility ever since you first warned us about anti-human sentiment in the outer sectors. Dr. Choi Yu-jin's research team has been working on projects that the Senate does not know about. We knew that someday diplomacy might fail, and we would need other options." Taeho felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of projects?" he asked. "The kind that will show the galaxy what human ingenuity really looks like when we are fighting for our children's lives. If you give us the authorization, we can demonstrate that humanity is not as helpless as these aliens believe." Taeho thought about the pictures of dead children that still filled his dreams every night. Little Song Mira from New Sol Colony, who had always hugged him when he visited. She had wanted to be a diplomat like him because she believed that words could solve any problem. The Corvani had burned her alive while she slept in her bed. He thought about his nephew Mi Young, who would never have another birthday party. He thought about all the human families who had trusted the galactic community to protect them. He thought about his own children who were growing up in a universe that saw them as expendable. The next morning, Taeho put on his diplomatic uniform for the last time. He walked through the crystal halls of the Senate building and remembered all the speeches he had given about cooperation and mutual respect. He remembered the trade deals and cultural exchanges and patient negotiations that had accomplished nothing when his people needed protection most. The Senate chamber was full of alien delegates discussing routine business when Taeho requested permission to address the assembly. The Vrexian chancellor granted him 5 minutes to speak, which was the standard time allotment for minor diplomatic announcements. Taeho walked to the central podium, where he had stood so many times before as Earth's peaceful representative. He looked out at the hundreds of alien faces that had listened to his words about friendship and understanding. Most of them would not even meet his eyes now. Distinguished delegates, he began in the same calm voice he had always used. "For 5 years I have served as Earth's ambassador to this body. I have worked tirelessly to build bridges between humanity and the galactic community. I have believed in the principles of democracy and justice that this Senate claims to represent. He paused and removed the small golden badge that marked him as an official diplomat. The badge fell to the floor with a tiny ringing sound that echoed through the silent chamber. But recent events have shown me that these principles are meaningless when they are not backed by strength. The massacre of our children has revealed the true nature of galactic politics. You respect only power and fear only consequences. The alien delegates began murmuring among themselves as they realized that something unprecedented was happening. Never before had a species formally withdrawn from diplomatic relations during a Senate session. Therefore, I formally withdraw humanity from all treaties and agreements with the Galactic Empire. Earth rejects the authority of this Senate and declares total war against the Corvani Empire and any nation that supports them. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and panicked discussions. Some aliens called for security while others demanded that Tejo be arrested for making threats. But he continued speaking in the same steady voice that had once promoted peace. We will not stop until every human child's death has been avenged. We will not negotiate. We will not compromise. We will not show mercy to those who showed none to our babies. He turned and walked out of the Senate chamber, while chaos erupted behind him. His 5 years as a diplomat were over. Now Earth would speak to the galaxy in the only language they understood. 2 weeks after Tejo's declaration of war, the galaxy discovered that humanity had been hiding incredible secrets. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, and on hidden bases throughout the solar system, human scientists had been developing technologies that made alien science look primitive and outdated. Dr. Choi Yu-jin had been working in secret laboratories for over 10 years, developing weapons and defensive systems that the Galactic Senate knew nothing about. Her quantum phase weapons could pass through any known type of shielding, as if it did not exist. Her gravity manipulation drives allowed human ships to move in ways that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. The human military had been studying alien technology and tactics ever since first contact with the galactic community. They had learned from every alien species and combined the best ideas with human innovation and creativity. While Tejo was negotiating trade deals, Earth's engineers were building the most advanced war machine the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kang Soo-jin commanded the first human strike force that left Earth's solar system. Her fleet consisted of 50 ships that looked nothing like the peaceful transport vessels that humans had been using for civilian purposes. These were sleek black warships with armor plating that seemed to absorb light and weapons arrays that hummed with barely contained energy. The Corvani military command expected a desperate attack by an inferior species that was acting out of grief and rage. Their intelligence reports said that humans had no significant military technology and only basic spaceflight capabilities. General Korvac himself had dismissed Earth's war declaration as the empty threats of a primitive civilization. But when Admiral Soo-jin's fleet arrived at Vortex Station, the main Corvani military shipyard, the aliens discovered that their assumptions were completely wrong. The human ships appeared on their sensors one moment and vanished the next, using cloaking technology that was far beyond anything the Corvani possessed. The first human attack targeted the shipyard's defensive platforms. Quantum phase weapons passed through the Corvani shields without any effect and struck the weapon emplacements directly. The explosions were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen before, creating cascading energy fields that disabled entire sections of the station. Admiral Vulcan, the Corvani fleet commander, sent desperate messages to his superiors as human forces systematically destroyed his battle groups. His ships fired thousands of plasma bolts and missile volleys, but the human vessels seemed to dance between the attacks using their gravity drives to perform impossible maneuvers. The Corvani had more ships and crews with decades of combat experience, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Human tactical thinking had been shaped by centuries of warfare on Earth, where survival meant constant innovation and adaptation. Every major battle in human history, from ancient naval conflicts to modern space engagements, had been studied and analyzed by Earth's military strategists. General Han Dong-woo coordinated the overall war effort from his command center deep beneath Seoul. His staff included historians and psychologists and anthropologists who understood that humanity's greatest advantage was not their technology, but their motivation. While alien species fought for territory or resources or political advantage, humans were fighting for something much more powerful. They were fighting for the right of their children to exist. This fundamental difference changed everything about how the war was conducted. Human soldiers did not retreat when faced with superior numbers, because they knew that failure meant more dead children. Human pilots pushed their ships beyond safe operational limits, because mechanical failure was preferable to allowing child killers to escape. Human commanders made sacrifices that seemed insane to alien observers, because they understood that some things were more important than individual survival. The second phase of the war began when Earth's intelligence networks activated throughout the galaxy. Spy Master. Oh Se-hun had been building these networks for years, using human diplomats and traders and tourists as cover for intelligence-gathering operations. Now these sleeper agents revealed themselves and began targeting Corvani allies and supporters. Alien leaders who had voted to support the massacre found themselves facing human assassins who appeared from nowhere and vanished without a trace. The weapons used in these eliminations were always different, but the message was always the same. Anyone who harmed human children would face Earth's vengeance no matter where they tried to hide. The Vrexian trade minister, who had once complimented human engineering, was found dead in his office with a small device next to his body. The device played a recording of his speech supporting the Corvani position in the Senate. His death appeared to be from natural causes, but everyone knew that humans had developed untraceable poisons. The Altarian Council members who had proposed forming an investigation committee instead of taking immediate action began receiving packages containing pictures of human children who had died in the massacre. Each package included a countdown timer that reached 0 at a different time. When the timers expired, those council members simply disappeared from their homes and offices. Space stations that had refused to provide aid to human refugees found their computer systems infected with viruses that displayed images of dead children on every screen. Trade routes that had continued operating with Corvani worlds discovered that their cargo ships were being intercepted by invisible human vessels that left no survivors. The galaxy watched in growing terror as humanity transformed from peaceful diplomats into an unstoppable force of vengeance. Species that had dismissed Earth as a backward planet began reassessing their positions as human battle fleets appeared in their star systems, demanding answers about their government's policies. The Corvani Empire itself was beginning to crumble as member worlds surrendered rather than face the terrible efficiency of human warfare. Admiral Vulcan sent increasingly desperate reports back to his homeworld describing battles that made no sense, according to established military doctrine. Human ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting with hull breaches and engine failures. Human crews that should have retreated continued their attacks even when facing impossible odds. Human commanders made tactical decisions that seemed suicidal, but somehow achieved victory against superior forces. What the Corvani did not understand was that humanity had learned the most important lesson of warfare. Technology and numbers and experience were all secondary to the willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believed in. The aliens had superior resources, but they were fighting for conquest and glory, while humans were fighting for their children's right to live. Dr. Park Hyo-jin revealed the final surprise when her research team successfully tested a new type of weapon that could destabilize entire star systems. The first demonstration took place in an uninhabited Corvani system, where a single device created an expanding field of exotic energy that would make the region uninhabitable for 1,000 years. The message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Earth now possessed the power to eliminate entire civilizations, and they were willing to use it to protect their young. The species that had once begged for acceptance into the galactic community had become its most feared military power in less than 3 months, and they were not finished yet. As human forces pressed deeper into Corvani territory, the other alien species began to understand that they had completely misjudged Earth's capabilities and intentions. What had started as a localized conflict was becoming a galaxy-wide reckoning that would reshape the balance of power forever. The Altarian Council sent desperate diplomatic messages to Earth requesting immediate peace negotiations. Their representatives offered to mediate a ceasefire and promised that the Corvani would be forced to pay reparations for the massacre. But Tae-ho, who was now serving as Earth's war minister, rejected all diplomatic overtures with cold efficiency. Humanity will accept nothing less than the complete surrender of the Corvani Empire and the personal execution of every leader who ordered the massacre of our children, he announced in a broadcast that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. We will not negotiate with child killers, and we will not show mercy to those who enabled them. The Vrexian chancellor attempted to organize a coalition of neutral species to intervene in the conflict before it spread further. But his efforts collapsed when human intelligence agents revealed recorded conversations between Vrexian officials discussing how to profit from human suffering. The recordings showed Vrexian leaders planning to take over human trade routes once the Corvani had eliminated Earth as a competitor. Within days of these revelations, Vrexian space stations throughout the galaxy found themselves under attack by human strike teams. The aliens had assumed that Earth's war was only with the Corvani, but they were discovering that humanity had been keeping detailed records of every species that had failed to act or had secretly supported the massacre. The Crystalline Empire tried to maintain strict neutrality by closing their borders to all military vessels, but human ships simply phased through their defensive barriers as if they did not exist. Crystalline worlds woke up to find human battle fleets in orbit around their planets, with weapons trained on major population centers. Admiral Sujin's personal message to the Crystalline Emperor was broadcast on every communication channel. Your government voted against emergency aid for human refugees after the massacre. Your trade ministry continued selling weapons to the Corvani while human children lay dead. Your neutrality is complicity, and Earth remembers every vote, every transaction, and every choice that enabled our enemies. The turning point came when human forces surrounded the Corvani home system. General Korvac found himself trapped on his homeworld as Admiral Sujin's expanded fleet took control of every jump point and space lane in the region. His once mighty empire was crumbling as member worlds surrendered, rather than face humanity's terrible vengeance. But the most shocking moment occurred when a massive human armada arrived at Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Senate itself. Over 200 human warships took positions around the planet while the assembled alien governments watched in stunned disbelief. The aliens had assumed that Earth's war was limited to military targets and Corvani territory. They were wrong. Humanity had been analyzing 5 years of Senate records and trade data and diplomatic communications. They knew exactly which governments had supported the Corvani position and which ones had actively worked to prevent justice for the murdered children. Tae-ho's image appeared on screens throughout the capital city, and his voice carried the cold authority of someone who had been betrayed by everything he once believed in. The man who had once smiled and negotiated patiently now spoke with the absolute certainty of righteous vengeance. Every government that failed to act after our children were murdered is complicit in their deaths, he announced to the terrified alien populations. Every species that continued trading with the Corvani while human families buried their babies chose their side in this war. Every senator who voted for meaningless committees instead of real justice enabled genocide. The Senate building was surrounded by human marines in powered armor that made them look like mechanical demons. Their weapons were aimed at the crystal walls that had once seemed so beautiful and inspiring to young Ambassador Kim Tae-ho. Now those same walls represented the hollow promises of a corrupt system that valued political stability over justice. Inside, the Senate chamber alien delegates cowered behind their desks as human soldiers secured every entrance and exit. Many of the same politicians who had given speeches about the tragic nature of the massacre were now begging for mercy and claiming that they had always supported humanity. But Tae-ho had recordings of every Senate session and copies of every private communication between alien governments. He knew which species had secretly celebrated humanity's suffering and which ones had actively worked to prevent any meaningful response to the attacks. The Corvani delegation was arrested first. General Korvac and his subordinates were dragged from their diplomatic quarters in chains that neutralized their natural strength. They would be transported to Earth to face trial for crimes against humanity, but everyone knew what the verdict would be. Next came the representatives of 12 other species that had provided material support to the Corvani war effort. Their Governments had sold weapons and supplies and intelligence to the child killers even after the massacre became public knowledge. Human intelligence agents had documented every transaction and every communication that proved their guilt. The Altarian Prime Minister tried to claim diplomatic immunity when human soldiers came for him, but Earth no longer recognized the authority of galactic law. His government had proposed investigations and committees while human children remained unavenged. His calls for due process were ignored as he was dragged away to await execution. But Teho's vision extended beyond simple revenge. Standing in the same chamber where he had once been a humble ambassador, he announced the new reality that would govern galactic civilization. Earth was claiming authority over all matters involving crimes against children and civilian populations throughout known space. The Galactic Senate is dissolved, he declared to the assembled alien leaders. This corrupt institution failed in its most basic duty to protect innocent life. Humanity will establish a new government based on justice rather than politics and strength rather than empty words. Human battle fleets were already moving to enforce these declarations throughout the galaxy. Every world that had supported the Corvani faced military occupation. Every species that had voted against aid for human refugees found their trade routes controlled by Earth's navy. Every government that had enabled genocide discovered that their sovereignty no longer existed. The aliens who had once dismissed humanity as primitive were learning that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Earth had not just become the dominant military power in known space. They had become the moral authority that would determine which civilizations deserved to survive. And their judgment was based on a simple principle that would reshape the galaxy forever. Any species that harmed children would face the full wrath of humanity's war machine until every last child killer was dead and buried. The war ended not with negotiations or treaties, but with complete and total human victory. The Corvani Empire was dissolved completely, with every world placed under direct military control by Earth's occupation forces. General Korvac and his entire command structure were transported to Earth in chains and executed publicly in front of cameras that broadcast their deaths to every inhabited system in the galaxy. But Teho's vision extended far beyond simple revenge against the child killers. Humanity had learned the most important lesson about galactic politics. The only way to protect innocent life was to possess overwhelming power and the absolute will to use it. Earth would never again allow their children to be vulnerable to the hatred and fear of alien species. The new galactic constitution was written primarily by human legal experts, led by Judge Lim De Young, who had spent years studying the failures of the old Senate system. The document established strict laws protecting all sapient children throughout the galaxy, regardless of their species or homeworld. Any attack on civilian populations, particularly children, was classified as a crime against all intelligent life, punishable by complete military intervention. Human battle fleets were stationed in every major star system to enforce these new laws. Admiral Su Jin commanded the largest navy in galactic history, with over 1,000 warships equipped with the most advanced technology ever developed. Her ships patrolled trade routes and monitored communications to ensure that no species would ever again attempt genocide against innocents. The enforcement was swift and merciless. When the Zephyrian Collective attempted to exterminate a smaller species over mining rights, human forces arrived within hours and completely destroyed the Zephyrian military. The surviving Zephyrian leaders were brought to Earth for trial and execution while their homeworld was placed under military occupation for 50 years. Many alien species initially resented humanity's new dominance, but they quickly discovered that human leadership brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the galaxy. Earth's advanced technologies were shared freely with species that demonstrated respect for sapient rights and children's welfare. Fusion reactors and gravity drives and quantum computers became available to any civilization that followed the new moral standards. Trade flourished under human protection as wars between alien species virtually disappeared. Nobody dared to start conflicts when they knew that humanity would intervene on behalf of whoever was being oppressed. The galaxy experienced the longest period of peace in recorded history, as Earth's military might enforce justice rather than politics. Dr. Choi Yu-jin's research teams continued developing new technologies that benefited all sapient life. Medical. advances that could cure diseases affecting dozens of different species, agricultural techniques that could feed billions on worlds that had struggled with hunger, transportation systems that made travel between distant stars faster and safer than ever before. But these gifts came with absolute conditions. Any species that harmed children or committed genocide or enslaved other sapients would face Earth's immediate and total military response. The galaxy learned to live by human moral standards because the alternative was complete destruction. Tejo established his capital on Nexus Prime in the same chamber where he had once served as Earth's humble ambassador. The crystal walls had been modified to display images of the children who died in the Corvani massacre, ensuring that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Every decision made by the new government was guided by the memory of those innocent lives. His wife, So Young, created new educational programs that taught alien children about human culture and values. Schools throughout the galaxy incorporated lessons about the importance of protecting the innocent and standing up against injustice. Children from hundreds of different species learned to work together under the watchful protection of Earth's military forces. Their own children, Hyjin and Hyrin, grew up in a galaxy where no species would ever again dare to harm them. They attended schools where alien children looked up to humans as protectors and guardians of justice. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued their early years was replaced by absolute security, backed by their species' overwhelming military power. The Memorial to the Massacred Children became the most visited site in the galaxy. Beings from every species came to pay their respects to the human youngsters whose deaths had changed the course of galactic civilization. The names of Song Mira and all the other victims were carved in quantum crystal that would last until the heat death of the universe. Earth's transformation from a diplomatic species to a galactic superpower became the subject of countless studies by alien historians and philosophers. They all reached the same conclusion that humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology or their military tactics, but their absolute refusal to allow harm to come to children. The Corvani had believed they could intimidate humanity into leaving the galaxy by murdering innocent youngsters. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant that possessed both the power and the moral authority to reshape the entire cosmos. They had wanted to eliminate humanity before they became too powerful, but instead had created the very future they feared most. A galaxy where human values reigned supreme and where the laughter of children from every species was protected by the overwhelming might of Earth's military machine. Where justice was enforced by beings who understood that some principles were worth any sacrifice to defend. The old galactic order based on politics and compromise and empty diplomatic gestures was dead forever. In its place stood a new civilization, founded on the simple truth that had driven humanity to victory. Anyone who threatened children would face the full fury of a species that valued innocent life above their own survival. And throughout the galaxy, parents of every species tucked their youngsters into bed each night, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human warships patrolled the stars, ensuring that no harm would ever come to the innocent again.